And I want to start here by saying that I feel so much better than last week. We didn't touch on this on the show, guys. Last week, I was in bad shape. I made it through the show. When I got here last week, I felt like I was going to throw up. I told everyone that. I had food poisoning like 24 hours before, a day or two after the show. And yet I made it through, guys. And that fantasy segment, if you look back, like we should have a picture of it we put up on the screen here or something, I was looking rough. I was looking pale. The shirt was all disheveled. But this week, I'm feeling so much better. I'm glad for that. And I'm here to talk about wide receivers, what you should be doing with wide receiver in your drafts, some breakouts, some busts, some sleepers, just like we've been doing every week so far. We talked about quarterbacks 2 weeks ago, running backs last week, and now we're going to go through receivers. So let's start with draft strategy. And you see the list behind me here. If I can, I want to end up with 2 of these guys. I want to go heavy with receiver at the top of my draft. I mentioned last week, I like hero RB or anchor RB, that approach. I want to get 1 running back early. But after that, those first 4 rounds, I want 3 receivers if I can. I want to load up that part of my roster. I don't want to have to worry about receivers later in the draft. So you get those 3 early in the first 4 rounds. Round 5, again, not to spoil tight ends here. Round 5, you try to get one of the elite guys that are still on the board. And then from round 6, round 7, round 8, I want 1 running back, I want 1 quarterback, and then I want 1 more receiver, and that's because there's still a lot of good receivers in that range, guys that are going to have guaranteed volume, and then the drop-off kind of starts to happen after that, and then you're just kind of throwing darts at guys at that point. So let's get into the breakouts here, because if you can hit on one of these breakouts, that is going to make your life so much easier. And let's start with a guy that I really like. I talk about the Falcons so much this year because I think they are going to be one of the best teams out there in the league with all the improvements that they've made. Drake London. You see him at the bottom of that list there. Now you see his stats. And the last 2 seasons, he has dealt with some of the worst quarterback play in the league. He still managed to put up okay stats. Had 866 yards 2 years ago. Had 905 yards last year. Doing it with quarterbacks like Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota. Just terrible. And if you want to know exactly how bad it was, he's been in the bottom 8 the last 2 years in completion, in catchable target rate. That is so awful for him. But this year, they go out and they solve that problem. They get Kirk Cousins. They get Michael Penix Jr. to back up Cousins just in case he gets hurt, right? So they've figured out the quarterback situation. They have a new coaching staff there. That's going to be exciting. Zach Robinson bringing over that Sean McVay system we expect. This year, Drake London, we're finally going to see it all come together. A former first-round pick who is going to be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Now, if we want to go a little bit further down the board, another guy that I really like that you can get in that round 6, round 7, round 8 range, Jackson Smith-Njigba on the Seahawks. We've mentioned this on the show already. Ryan Grubb is going to come in for the Seahawks and very much improve that offensive attack. All the players are talking about it. It's going to be more explosive. They're going to push the ball downfield more. And if you think back to last year, what happened with JSN, he joins a team where, okay, they had DK Metcalf. They had Tyler Lockett, right? So we kind of knew it was going to be tough for him at the start, even though he was a first-round pick. Then he breaks his wrist in August. That is devastating for any rookie. He's missing valuable reps. So early in the season, wasn't doing much. But as the year went along, we started to see a little bit from him. Over the last 12 weeks last season, 50% of his games, he had double-digit fantasy points. Now this year, with the new system, I'm expecting we're going to see him overtake Tyler Lockett, who's now 32 years old. JSN is going to have a breakout campaign. Could be a wide receiver 3 for fantasy, maybe even better this season. And I know I'm running through a bunch of stuff here. I want to give you guys an opportunity to potentially ask some questions. Do you guys have anything so far based on what I've said?
Yeah, I love the JSN call. I'm a big fan of Ryan Grubb's offense and what he's going to bring to Seattle. And having looked at your rankings, I know that might be surprising to you, but I noticed that you are higher than consensus on all of the Seahawks receivers. That's DK Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett. So I know you're expecting big things from this offense. If I'm in a range where I get 1 or even 2 of those guys, is it a big galaxy brain theory of mine that I could just wait on quarterback and pair him up with Geno Smith at the end of the draft?
You could. I think you're taking unnecessary risk at that point.
Okay.
And you weren't here a couple weeks ago when we talked about quarterbacks. There's 12 or 13 really good fantasy quarterbacks this season. So you don't really have to go out and kind of wait until the later rounds like we've done in years past. You wait until the late rounds, you grab one, maybe two guys. You don't really have to do that this year if we're talking about, regular redraft leagues, single quarterback kind of leagues. 2 quarterback, super flex leagues. For sure, in best ball, that's more what we're talking about. You want to think about those cheaper stacks that you can make. You want to go out and get a Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice. You want to stack those guys. It's going to cost you quite a bit. Seahawks, you could do it much, much cheaper. So I like that for those formats. If you're in best ball, if you're in a really big tournament, you want to look at those kind of options. But in regular leagues, you don't have to worry too much about stacking. It's not as important.
See, I got a bit of a challenge in my home league. There's a bunch of guys who, for some reason, like to draft their second quarterback before I even draft my first. So I don't know what to do in that situation. So I often end up with a guy like Geno. So that's kind of why I ask. And I just expect big things for the Seahawks offense. And there's a lot of mouths to feed, but I think they can do it.
Are you in a league with Boone here? Because he had Geno as a sleeper on his quarterbacks. He's kind of like, oh, why don't you just leave Geno alone?
No,
he's hustling you, man.
I'm not in a league with Boone right now.
We have been over the years.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be in the office league this year, but I guess my follow-up question to all that is, how do you recommend we use all of this information against you in the leagues that we're in with you?
You have it open on your laptop while you're drafting. You use it all. The Score Fantasy Football Draft Kit, it's loaded with all my content. You can get it for free at theScore. You can listen to the Score Fantasy Football podcast. We're putting out multiple episodes right now. That'll crank up even more during the season. Just tons of information in there. And I know there's a lot of people in the office that are using my rankings. I even know some people, we won't mention any names, but one person that we work with, they're in a league with their wife and some of their friends' wives and some of their buddies. And their wife actually won the league one year and specifically cited that she used my rankings when she did it. So I love hearing that. That is fantastic. And I will mention, talking about the Seahawks, I'm going to mention one more guy a little bit later. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about him near the very end. But let's go the opposite way now. Let's talk about some of the bust candidates. And I hate doing this. I hate getting negative with it. These guys, I don't dislike them. They're great players for sure. It's just about the cost this year. And their situation's changing a little bit. So the first one is Michael Pittman on the Colts. And I've talked a lot about the Colts and liking them this season. So maybe you're surprised that I'm a little bit down on Pittman. Part of it is because he's going in the 3rd round of fantasy drafts. That's a very expensive price for a guy who I think there's a lot of reasons why he had a breakout season last year. And things are sort of shifting in a different way for him. And last year, he was kind of the man in that Colts offense. Jonathan Taylor missed a big chunk of the beginning of the year. Later in the season, he really got back to himself. But what else did they have? Josh Downs was a rookie. He dealt with some injuries. They really didn't have other options. Anthony Richardson got hurt. When that happened, Gardner Minshew comes in and just starts peppering Pittman with targets. He ends up with 109 catches, finishes as the wide receiver 19 in fantasy points per game. Now you cut to this year. We have other guys. They draft A.D. Mitchell in the 2nd round. Josh Downs is hurt right now. He is going to be back eventually. And prior to that injury, people were very excited about what he's going to be able to do this season in that offense. And Jonathan Taylor is going to enter the year healthy this time around, on top of the fact that Minshew is gone. Anthony Richardson is back, and Anthony Richardson, they're going to run the ball quite a bit. This is a dual threat quarterback. I don't envision the same kind of scenario as Pittman had last year where he's just getting peppered with targets. So I think that's going to be a problem for him. I think he's going to take a bit of a step back. Not a guy that I want to spend up for in the 3rd round. Now, if we go to another guy that could potentially flop this year, Keenan Allen. And again, I want to say, I still think that Keenan Allen has a ton of talent. He's a player that is going to age fairly gracefully. I think he has the route running ability where he can continue to produce well into his 30s, but he is completely changing into a new situation. He's going from the Chargers, where last year Mike Williams was hurt and he got all the targets. He led the league with 11.5 targets per game. This season, he's in Chicago. DJ Moore is the lead receiver there. They spent a top 10 pick on Rome Odunze. They have other weapons like Cole Kmet at tight end, like Gerald Everett at tight end, like DeAndre Swift, who, yes, maybe not the best fantasy option, but somebody else that's going to command some targets in that offense. And the reports that we've heard about Keenan Allen this year, I don't know if he's 230 pounds like we heard at one point, but he does look a little bit bigger out there. Could it just be a veteran who's kind of getting back in shape for the season? For sure, but I'm concerned that he's going to go from the Chargers, where he was getting all those targets, to this Bears offense where he's now fighting with these other receivers. And as the year goes along, is that top 10 rookie in Odunze going to start to overtake him potentially in two receiver sets? Those are my concerns there, guys. I know as the resident Chargers fan, Tyler, you're going to have something to say about this, I'm guessing. Are you in or out on Keenan Allen this year?
Yeah, Keenan's my favorite football player of all time. I definitely don't think what you're saying is wrong at all. I do think, Father Time has gotten every single guy at the receiving spots, but, he's looked better aging than a Julio Jones even. My question to you is more, I guess, because, I'm still willing to have Keenan on my fantasy team. I think a lot of people hear bust and they think, absolutely under no circumstance draft. How do you feel about these two guys? Is there a time in your draft that you might still be willing to take them, or are you just so razor focused on where you're addressing next? Or is there an ADP or a number you draft either one of these guys?
That is a great point. There really isn't any player that's a complete avoid for me. If they fall several rounds, I'm more than willing to take them in that range. So for Pittman, if he fell to like the late fourth, I would start to consider him there. For Allen, if he fell a round or so, I would start to consider him there. For example, and I'm switching over to running back for this one, but J.K. Dobbins, who I'm very worried about with the Achilles and everything, I took him in the last round of a draft on the weekend just because he fell that far. So I'm willing to take almost anybody if the value presents itself. I think that's a very good point. Mm-hmm. Now, let's move on to a sleeper. I'm just going to give you one because, like I said at the top, I normally don't want to spend those late picks at receiver. I think it's much more valuable to be grabbing running backs in that range, those high upside guys. For every Puka Nacua that's out there, you got him in the late rounds, it is very difficult. There are tons of just average or potential bust guys that are available in that range. So I don't want to be wasting those bullets there. I want to be taking those running backs. But there is somebody going after the 10th round that you can get that I think is in a really good spot. I don't understand why he's being devalued. It is Brandon Cooks on the Cowboys. We've seen this guy produce before. He's done it his whole career. And then last year in that Cowboys offense, when they finally figured things out, it kind of took them until week 6. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. That was when they started to realize, okay, we're going to have to throw the ball a ton here. From that point on, Dak Prescott was the QB1 overall in fantasy. From that point on, CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy. And from that point on, Brandon Cooks was the wide receiver 25 in fantasy points per game. You're able to get him right now outside of the top 50 receivers, sometimes outside of the top 60 receivers. And this has nothing to do with CeeDee Lamb and the contract issues. I imagine they're going to get that all sorted out. This is just because the Cowboys didn't really add anybody else. I thought they were going to. They haven't. They're really expecting the Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, these other guys to step up. They still have Jake Ferguson at tight end. The running back room is arguably worse than last year now, so Cooks is in a really nice spot. A lot of the beat writers have pointed out that this season, another year to build chemistry with Dak Prescott, that he's looked really good in practices. So I like him as somebody that you can get very, very late and potentially be a wide receiver 3 or at least a flex in your lineup. So if you end up waiting really, really long for that next wide receiver, you can get him there. Now, the thing everybody wants to know, and this is why we always finish off with it, who are the receivers who are going to lead me to a fantasy title? And I will remind everyone, you can go to the theScore Fantasy Football Draft Kit. I write an article every year, 7 players who are going to lead you to a fantasy title. There's players at every single position. I put 3 receivers in there. I'm going to talk about 2 of them today. I'm going to make you go check out the third one in the draft kit and in that article. And the first guy that I want to mention, Garrett Wilson on the Jets. This would have happened last year. If Aaron Rodgers had stayed healthy last year all season long, Garrett Wilson right now would be talked about along with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase as one of the truly elite receivers in the NFL. Now Rodgers is back. All of the reports coming out of practice are he is just lighting it up. They have a great connection. Garrett Wilson was able to put up over 1,000 yards and over 80 catches each of the last 2 years with terrible, maybe the worst quarterback play in the league. Now he gets Aaron Rodgers, so very excited about him joining that top 5 potentially at the position. And then the other guy, I saved it till the end, that other Seahawks player, DK Metcalf. And we've already seen DK Metcalf put up a ceiling season. He did it back in 2020, had over 1,300 yards, had a great touchdown total, finished as the wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game that year. So he can be a wide receiver 1 for fantasy. Now, the last 3 seasons, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 27, wide receiver 20, but going back to Ryan Grubb showing up, going back to the new coaching staff, the offensive line hopefully being a little better this year, some better injury luck, and then bringing in a few reinforcements at tight end just in case some of those guys get injured again. I'm very excited about what DK Metcalf could do, and his new head coach, Mike McDonald, talked about how they want to use him this year. They want to move him around the formation. They want to make it tough on defenses to focus on him. I love hearing that. They've also talked about wanting to give him as many targets as possible. They acknowledge what kind of weapon he could be in this offense, and going back to everything I said about JSN, about Geno Smith, about that Seahawks passing attack and that Seahawks offense as a whole, I can't wait to see what DK Metcalf is going to do this year. I think he could potentially be a wide receiver 1 again for fantasy, guys.
Well, I mean, my question, look, there's a certain discomfort I think that comes with making any Jets wideout the anchor of your wide receiving core. Garrett Wilson has 7 career touchdowns. Is that just a function of the quarterbacks he's played with the last couple seasons, or is there something about him in the red zone? Essentially, talk me off the ledge about Garrett Wilson, because, dude,
the red zone was it. I was looking. Remember we were talking about the Jags numbers, struggles. The Jets, I'm pretty sure, might have had historically one of the worst red zone offenses I've ever seen. They were scoring touchdowns at a less than a 30% rate.
Dude,
inside the 20.
He had 1 touchdown after week 2 last season, and I get it. The quarterback play was shoddy to say the least, but just talk me off the ledge with Wilson.
No, I'm blaming that all on the quarterback play. I think we've seen more than enough from him. The fact that he was able to produce with those quarterbacks, even though the touchdowns weren't there, I think there's a few players on that Jets offense, and I don't want to spoil the tight end episode next week, but there's a few players in that offense that I think are going to have a much better chance to put up a decent touchdown total, and that's going to lift them up for fantasy as well. So no, I have zero concerns about Garrett Wilson. Him going at the end of the first round right now is a lot nicer when he was going at the beginning of the second round earlier in the offseason, but because of some of the injuries to Jahmyr Gibbs and Puka Nacua, now he's kind of slid up into that first round, but I'm still more than willing to take him there. Come back around, you got to get that running back at some point in that range, whether it's in the second or the third, but Garrett Wilson is going to be somebody we're very happy to have on your fantasy team this season.